In 1992, Barcelona staged its first ever Olympic Games. Ironically, the city was the birthplace of the then IOC president, Juan Antonio Samaranch, and it delivered a stunning spectacle and a most memorable Olympiad. Officially opened by King Juan Carlos on the 25th of July, over 9,300 athletes competed in 286 events. The United States was strong as ever, winning 108 medals in total. The Great Britain and Northern Ireland team won 20 medals, including 5 golds. This equalled the number of golds won at the previous 3 Summer Games, but was the lowest total medals achieved since Montreal in 1976. However, the memories of incredible individuals live on as another chapter in the history of the Olympic movement. Joining us today, 3 athletes of exceptional quality who inspired a generation. Born in Gosport in 1966, 400-metre athlete Roger Black was twice a silver medalist in Atlanta in 1996, but 4 years previous he entered the Olympic podium for the very first time as a bronze medalist as part of the 4x400 metres relay team. A captain of the Great Britain and Northern Ireland team, he collected 15 medals at major athletics events, including 9 golds. Joining Roger is a lady who hurdled her way into the record books. From Chigwell in Essex, a good 3 months younger than Roger, Sally Gunnell became the darling of the women's athletics scene during the 1990s. She became the first woman to hold the European, Commonwealth, World and Olympic hurdles titles all at the same time. My next guest created Olympic history when at the ripe old age of 32, he became the oldest man ever to win the 100 metres sprint. Linford Christie was the first European to break the 10 seconds barrier and was the world record holder indoors at the 200 metres. He became the most decorated British male athlete of all time, which included sprinting golds in all 4 major championships. Linford, let's go back to a year before Barcelona, the 1991 World Championships in Tokyo. What an amazing 100 metres final where you came 4th and broke the European record at the same time.
Definitely, I became the 4th fastest man in the world over 100 metres. And to me, what was fascinating about it was that I didn't have anything to show for it. That was one of those things, and I never thought I was ever going to run any quicker. So, after having words with my coach, we decided, maybe it's time to retire.
So you thought about retiring?
I did indeed. Yes, I did, because I thought that was, my limit. I never thought I'd ever run much quicker than 9.92 to be the 4th fastest man in the world.
Ron Rodden was your coach. Why did you go on?
Well, we decided to, Ron told me to put it on ice and talk about it. And then I just got so many letters from people who had already bought tickets to go to Barcelona. They said, we got tickets, let's, one more year. And so we decided to give it one more go and see what happens. And we realised there's lots of faults I had, technical faults like my start could have been better and everything else. And we thought, if we can work on those things, get it right, who knows what can happen.
Roger, were you aware of this at the time?
Yeah, I think I was aware of it. I mean, it was tough those days, because there were so many of us out there winning medals that, one year you can be, the person winning the gold, and the next year, I remember Linford coming away from Tokyo and having to put up with myself and Akabusi and Regis and Redmond just sort of dominating the headlines, by beating the Americans in the relay, and then you've spent time with the other 3, they're not quiet, and it's tough, and there was an upside to being in that team because I think the success of that era. We all sparked off each other. Success led to success, but there was a flip side to that. If you didn't have a good one. It was, you thought, hang on a minute, and for Linford, he had a good one. He was 4th fastest man in history, but he didn't have a medal, and the public don't really care about the details, they care about the medals. But I think like many athletes, you come off it, you feel, come on, I can't do it again. But fortunately for everybody, he got over it pretty quickly, got back training, and the rest is history.
Now, Sally, you looked as if you were going to get the gold in that 91, except for the last hurdle. Remind us what happened.
Well, I just remember thinking what I wanted to try and achieve was a medal that year. I just thought if I can, get a medal this year, then that will put me in good stead for the year before. And then I remember sort of coming off the 8th hurdle and thinking, I could actually win this. And then, but then I started to look around a bit and see the others were up there as well. And then I just completely lost focus, then ended up stuttering over that 10th hurdle, having a bit of a ding-dong with Sandra Farmer-Patrick as well, which we sort of had that relationship went on for quite a while, a few years after that. And I ended up in second place, and Neda Squire, the Russian girl, actually won. But everyone said, brilliant, you know, you got a silver medal. But I knew that actually I could have won that gold medal, and I was, you know, pretty annoyed with myself.
I mean, it's been a pretty remarkable year for you up to then, hasn't it? Well, it's still very good getting a silver, but you know, the build up to that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd been going well. I knew I was, you know, capable. I literally just doubted that myself, just a tiny little bit. And you can't afford to do that in this game. You know, you've got to be out there and believing 100% in your performance. And I wasn't quite there. But do you know, I sometimes look back and think I'm glad that result happened, because it made me go away and do things and change things and understand a little bit more of who I was as a person to make sure it didn't happen again.
You had actually, just to underline that, you had the perfect World Championship, really, in a way that you came.
I didn't.
Well, you got silver.
No,
silver
I
against
won,
the fastest guy.
No, I didn't, because I should have won the 400 metres. It's the only time in my career I could have won a global title, because it was just before Michael Johnson took on the 400. I wasn't. I wasn't. I couldn't.
Who won it?
A guy called Antonio Pesegru won it.
Yeah.
And I lost it. He didn't win it. I lost it. He took me on the line and by about 200ths of a second. And it's the one regret of my career. But, and we all do this, we all look back. And I wonder if I'd won the World Championships then in '91, whether I would have gone on to win the Olympic silver in '96, because I think my world would have changed so dramatically if I'd been world champion then. And I would have been double world champion then. And, you know, that's great out there in the public, but we as athletes know that you know, I wasn't like these guys who were capable of really dominating regularly. You know, I was scrapping around for most of my career, and so I don't know if I could have coped with that double, you know, world champion title. So I'd love to have been world champion, but I think it was all meant to be, actually.
But you see, that's an interesting situation there, because you've just said that Linford did really well, even though he came fourth. And at the time, we all thought you did brilliantly, getting a silver against the fastest guy at the time.
I had. It was still good. It was still good. But you know, as an athlete, you know the races you should have won. And so, if we go forward 5 years, in '96, I got an Olympic silver. Absolutely, you know, that represented a personal gold for me. Whereas the silver in Tokyo in '91 should have been a gold.
Well, you know, of course, that your gold was part of this serious time of our lives with the other three colleagues. I mean, that was a fabulous achievement, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
Americans had never been beaten.
Never been beaten, and haven't been beaten since. We should have had them in '96, but we messed that one up. So that's one of the greatest races of all time, because it was the perfect story. You know, the underdogs coming from behind and beating the firm favourites.
And Chris Akabusi told us that he was the mastermind, of course, as he would.
Well, yeah. There were two masterminds on that one, and that was the two of us in our room the night before. But that was a great team. I mean, that was, you know, that isn't the British record-holding team actually now. That was a team I was in '96. But if people ask me what's the greatest team you ever ran in, it's those three. Absolutely, for me.
Well, you made them change the rules. I mean, before the Americans, you had to finish in the first four to be on the relay team. And after that, they changed the rules. I mean, I think that is a great achievement in itself. Yeah,
well, it was their arrogance. Yeah, and we've all been up against the American arrogance over the years in track and field. And the arrogance was exactly that, Linford. You know, we just put the first four from the trials in, whatever. We weren't select who's right for the time. So we took a chance.
Those are the days of our lives.
Were you all great mates, or was there a bit of envy on some people going to Australia, you going to Portsmouth? I mean, were you all great pals at the end?
We were all great. I mean, didn't I meet you on the beach in Australia?
Australia, yeah. I don't know if it was then or a few. That was probably a bit later, because I was injured then. I was out.
But Andy Norman, you know, God rest his soul, he paid for, you know, some of my warm weather training and everything else like that. You know, he looked after me, you know, pretty well. So it enabled me to do all the things I did. And also, I mean, I was lucky in a way that was my coach then, went full time, and everywhere I went, he was with me. But I mean, no, we all got on great. We played tricks on each other.
You had to, because we spent so many hours sitting around hotel rooms, and often it was just literally Colin, you and me, so many times at Grand Prix that you had to. He used to get really annoying. He used to pick any argument. He would be always the opposite. And he was so wrong, and he knew he was so wrong, but he just loved an argument, and we used to sit there for hours, and he'd just drive you mad. But
I think you look back at our era, and there were a lot of us who were able to make finals. So for the public watching, there was always somebody to watch, and then a whole group who were fighting for medals. Because you had Colin Jackson, Chris Akabusi, John Regis, Steve Backley. You had a whole group of people, and so there was always something to watch. So, and I think we weren't all, we had our pockets of mates, obviously, but I think we all recognised that we were part of a team, and that really came into its own when you would go to the major championship, when you're actually around each other a lot. You're wearing the same tracksuit or whatever. Athletics, you do tend to fragment and do your own preparation. But you're always aware that you are part of a bigger team, and that really kicks in when you go to a championship. And there's no doubt with these two, what they did in Barcelona, that had an influence on the whole of the Olympic
I always
team.
remember thinking, I'm not letting those guys have all the glory. And I remember him coming up to me in Barcelona saying, right, I've won. So unless you want to sit at the back of the plane with everybody else, you know what you've got to go and do. And part of that really worked. You just think, I'm not letting him going out there and having all the glory.
Well, also because we all, what we did, we all stayed in the same hotel. We all stayed with the team.
Yeah, we always did.
Which I think we have pockets of kids now who don't want to stay with the team anymore. But we ate in the village. We ate the same food as everyone else, and so we became the same. And we'd pass in, you talk. We sat and we played cards. We did all, I jumped out the wardrobe on Sally a couple of times, and we just played tricks to take your mind off training and the competition and everything else, which kept you relaxed.
The media, Linford, what were they like to cope with? I mean, were you conscious of the media? Were they a problem? I'm not talking about later. I'm talking about going into the Barcelona. What did you make of the media?
I mean, for me, I suppose it's strange because we had no media training. So 1 minute you're nobody, next minute you're propelled to the front page, the back page, and the middle page, and we were never taught how to deal with it. And for me, I always wondered, I thought we were all supposed to be on the same side, and we weren't. To me, it didn't seem that we were all on the same side at all. So now I realise you shouldn't take it personal because they're trying to sell a newspaper. But at the time, I just felt that we could have done with a little bit more support, because to me, I always thought that encouragement strengthens labour. And sometimes they wrote you off even before you even ran the race, and I couldn't cope with that.
Did it? You say you couldn't cope with it. Did it affect you when you're going into a race? Was that subconsciously in the background or not?
Well, no, it didn't affect me. The thing is that, and sometimes they say,
I think it helped him, actually.
Yeah, I'd say that.
Really?
I do, and I think we're all different, and Linford and I are very
I
different,
don't know if
very different people. I think it probably did help Linford.
Why did they pick on you?
Well, he was good.
And that's exactly what it was, And for me, I suppose the more personally I took it, then the more newspapers they can sell off it. And, they enjoy winding me up and everything else. But, there were times away from all that, we all got on quite well. And, I remember sitting, we'd go out with Kenny Mays and, Colin Hart and all these guys. And, we'd have a good time and everything. And then you think, the next day they wrote something, you're thinking, why? I thought we were supposed to be, but, saying that, it's life. And with hindsight, maybe I would have handled it a little bit different.
But that's experience, isn't it? And
definitely.
Getting older.
I was lucky because I had him around, so I didn't get anything. They all just gave him all the flack.
I don't think you can. I think it's wrong in any sport to expect everyone to behave the same way. And you look at great athletes, and some of the greatest athletes did not get on with the media. Some of the greatest athletes were not people who, that was who they were. Judge them on their performance. Don't judge them on how they are off the track. And we're all different. And although we all sort of sit under the same banner, we're all different. And I think Linford, in some ways, probably didn't know he enjoyed it, but I think he fed off it. And I think he was part of him would have done. And I'm not saying he loved it. He probably we all don't like things written about ourselves, but in the end, it can be used as fuel. And Daley Thompson was the same. And Seb was the same. In many ways, Seb Coe was the same. So, you know, it can go hand in hand with great performance.
Let's move into the Olympics. Talk about the Derek Redmond situation. If you just remind everybody what that was about.
Well, I mean, in '92 in Barcelona, I mean, Derek Redmond created arguably one of the most emotional moments in Olympic history. And it was the semi-final. It was the first semi-final of the 400 metres. It was the race before me. I was in the second semi-final. And he was in great shape. You know when an athlete's in great shape. You have your moments. There are moments in your career when you're just Kelly Holmes in Athens for those 2 or 3 weeks. You know, you can't do anything wrong. And Derek was in great shape. Derek Redmond would have made the Olympic final, and I believe Derek Redmond would be fighting. I'm not sure he would have won it, because he wouldn't have won it, but I think he would have certainly been fighting for Olympic medals in Barcelona. He was on a roll. And he, after 120 metres of the 400 metre semi-final, he pulled the hamstring muscle in his left leg and collapsed onto the track, so it's all over. And he gets up, starts hobbling around the track, and his father, Jim, jumps onto the track and carries him and holds him, and with Derek, you know, tears coming out of his eyes. And they stay in his lane, and his father carries him around the track and crosses the line with his son so that, you know, his son can complete his Olympic journey. And Derek never ran again after that day. So yeah, and I was aware of what was going on, and then ran my semi-final after that. But what, you know, you don't want to be famous. You want to be famous for winning medals. Yeah. Unfortunately, he did, because the year before he was part of the relay team. But ultimately, Derek will always be remembered for that.
And he got a special award, didn't he, from the Olympic?
Yeah, he did. He got some sort of special.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was.
It was.
But I'll tell you what, he would have rather taken a medal.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, from your point of view, you had a 19-year-old David Grindley alongside you, and he just edged you out of the final.
Yeah, you forgot about him. He's an airline pilot now.
Is he really?
Yeah.
He edged you out, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He was in great shape, and he got to the Olympic final. I don't know where he came, 5th, 6th, or something like that. But I mean, it shows you how hard it is in athletics. I mean, we sit here now, 20 years down the road, and you look at the medal tallies and what we've won. You know, David Grindley was one of the few, and there were only 2 British athletes at 400 metres that worried me. Because I saw him in '93 run a race in Zurich or something. He ran 44.50 jogging in Zurich, and I thought, blimey.
Who was the other one?
Huh?
Who was the other one?
On his day, Derek.
Okay.
Derek's the only other one I really respected. And when you moved to Ewan Thomas and those guys, but yeah, I was done by then, so it didn't really matter. But Derek, and then Grindley hurt his Achilles in '93 before the World Championships, and
that was it.
all over, gone. And it's so hard to come back.
And that's the thing about athletics. The fitter you are, the more likely you are to get injured. And there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. Yeah. And when an athlete gets injured, it's not because he's not fit, it's because he is fit.
He's pushing.
And sometimes maybe too fit.
Exactly.
And
it's
so
a real fine line,
it's a
isn't
fine
it? You
line.
have to get on.
You break down. And people always say, I wish you luck. And I always say, I don't need luck, because I work hard. The only bit of luck that I may need is that I don't get injured.
And the best example of that is Kelly Holmes in Athens.
Right, just coming in, before we just actually touch on your 100 metres, let's just quickly go back to Seoul, because Ben Johnson has won the race in Seoul, and then he's got Carl Lewis second and you into bronze, and then, of course, Ben Johnson's disqualified. When did you hear about that, and how did you react to that?
I mean, I heard about it at the same time as everyone else, and, you know, the strange thing about that race was, you know, we all thought, we were all planning how we were going to beat Ben, because, I mean, it was just one of these strange things. And Ben would go hard for 60 metres, and then last 40 he would die. And everyone was thinking, oh yeah, you know, we'll train that winter, and we'll train, and we'll try and stay as close to him as much as we can to 60, and then maybe try and go past. And he got to 60 and he didn't stop. And, you know, looking back on that, it's so funny, because, you know, you can see, I mean, if you look on Carl Lewis's face, you can see that, because we all thought we'd get to 60, and we would put in that spurt and pull him back, and he got to 60, and then he just found, you know, maybe another 5 gears, which we didn't have, and it was just one of those strange. But I mean, I heard about it at the same time as everyone else did.
How did you feel about being jumped up from the bronze to the silver? Did that feel a bit strange?
Well, I mean, it was just I got my medal on the podium, and it was my bronze medal, and so I was happy with it at the time, and it didn't make no difference to me whether they'd bumped me up to gold or bumped me up to silver, whatever. It just didn't make no difference to me at all. It's that emotional thing you go through at the time, you know, the ceremony and everything else when they gave you a medal. I mean, you know, for me, that was the ultimate say. It didn't make no difference at all.
Did you feel, as a top athlete, let down by Johnson's behaviour?
Well, no, I mean, Ben's behaviour let himself down. He didn't let me down. He was nothing to do with me at all.
No,
You know,
but
I was out there doing
the sport, I meant, really, the image.
Well,
of
I mean,
it.
I felt sorry for the sport
Yeah.
in itself because, you know, it had to go through, you know, I would say, you know, really, you know, tumultuous time, you know, with all that sort of stuff. But what can you do?
Yeah.
You can't be out there thinking, this one's on drugs, so I'm not going to, you know, you just got to worry about yourself. Go out there and win your race. If he's on drugs, you've got to beat him. If he's not on drugs, you still got to beat him. So it's just one of those things.
So how do you feel going into the 100 metres in Barcelona? You are the oldest ever to win it, if you win it. 32 years of age. I mean, do sprinters really peak in their mid-20s, would you say, at that sort of distance or not?
Before, you know, most sprinters would finish at 22, 23.
Yeah.
And the reason being was because they were young guys in America at the universities and everything else. And so when I came into sport, we started making a living from the sport. Before that, prior to that, you could not make a living. So most of the guys who can run, and we had great guys like Mel Latany and all those guys who, you know, I hung around and, you know, learned a lot from. But they had to finish and, you know, get a job to make a living. But I could go on a lot longer because, you know, I was making a decent living from the sport. So that's the reason. Also, it's in the mind. You know, you are as old as, you know, the woman or the man you feel. So.
Also, you came late to the sport, didn't you?
Oh, yes,
you
I did.
Didn't come in that.
I mean, my
young.
first big championship was English schools. I was 19 years old. You know, I got beaten by Phil Brown. So in the 200 meters. So I mean, I think all athletes, you have a certain amount of time at the top,
Yes.
and you've got to think young. I mean, athletics is a young man's sport, and if you get into that mode where you feel you're old, it's all over.
Those are the days of our lives.
Were you happy with the start of that race? There wasn't a false start or anything. But
There was a false start. Leroy Burrell did a false start.
was that given as a false start?
It was given as a false start. And
Right.
the strange thing about, you know, that was the days when everyone was allowed 2 false starts.
Yeah.
So Leroy Burrell had a false start, and then you can see he was nervous because then he realised he has to hold, because if he goes again, he's going to get disqualified.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the rest of us was quite relaxed. And for me, my start, when I get to a championship, my start's always much better than it is when I'm training, because I just totally concentrate on the gun. And as we say, we're going to be at a bang. So when I got out, we got out in front of Leroy and he had to hold. And, you know, the rest was over. I mean, by the time I got to 60 metres, I knew I was going to win.
Atlanta, didn't you have two
No,
starts
I had
and got
one.
disqualified?
I had one.
You had one.
I had one. I still, to this day, say I had one.
Just to put the record straight on that one, great as you were.
They told me I moved too soon after the gun. So does that generate a false start? I don't know. I mean, I didn't realise you can do that. So they said, they said my problem was I moved too soon after the gun.
Anyway, let's get back. You've got a goal, right? So just remind us. You just said it. 60 metres.
60 metres.
You're in front, and no one's going to catch you now, are they?
Well, no, I mean, Bruni Seren, I think, and maybe Frankie was a little bit in front of me at the time. But, you know, I just knew that their finish wasn't that strong.
Frankie came second.
Yeah. You know, and I mean, you know, for me it was a great thing. I mean, I didn't get as much joy, I got to say, from winning the Olympics as I did from the World Championships. You know, the Olympics was for, you know, like Ron and the guys I trained with, and more people think a lot more of it. But the World Championships gave me that much more pleasure.
We never talk about coaches, do we? And we should do, because they're so important. What was your coach's reaction then? You just said you got more out of it than maybe you did.
I mean, Ron was a great guy. You know, to this day, Ron's still one of my best friends. We phone each other, we hang out, we do, you know, he's at my house every Christmas. I mean, without Ron, I would never, you know, have made it. And people will say, oh, you know, if you had any coach you had, you would have been successful. We don't know that. You know, I got it through Ron, and feather in my cap.
People quite rightly make a big thing, the oldest guy ever, 32. Did you stop at any point during the celebrations and think about the age?
No, I just thought, well, Zurich's next. You know, where do I go next? and to this day, I've never really had the time to sit down and say, oh, you know, really sit back and enjoy. I don't really watch my races and everything else like that, because then you become too complacent and everything else. And, you know, at the time, I still had more goals I wanted to achieve. So you win one race and, you know, that's it. You just got to go on to the next race. And that's how it was for us. You know, I mean, I'm sure you guys agree with it. You just got to go on to the next race and, you know, there's Grand Prix and everything else afterwards. And you've got to back up what you do. So that's the great thing, you know, I enjoy about our sport. And that's when, you know, I feel that someone can say, you know, whether you're one of the greats or how good you are or whatever, you know, you do it and you don't rest on your laurels. You go back out again and you say, I dare you to come and try and beat me. And, you know, you back it up. And I think that's the pressure that we're all under after major championships, to go back and, you know, to try and do it again.
Sally, let's move on to your event now. You've messed up, in a way, the last hurdle the year before. You're not going to do it this time, are you?
No, and I think I got very annoyed with myself and just said, right, you know, what am I going to do? What's the difference, really? And I just worked on it mentally, really, for that whole year beforehand, just telling yourself you're good enough and, you know, just mentally preparing it. And, you know, going into it, it's just, you know, I think if you have any little doubt in your mind, then you might as well settle for second best or whatever. I knew that I had to really believe in what I could do out there in that performance.
Would it be fair to say you're on top of the game right from the very start of the competition?
Yeah, I mean, all the Grand Prix leading up to it, Sandra, Farmer Patrick had very much won most of them. So I probably didn't go into the race as one of the favourites, which I actually quite liked. I think everyone thought that Sandra would win. But I also knew going into the competition that, you know, I was in best shape that I'm ever going to be in. This could only be my one opportunity, so I've got to make the most of it. I'd done every training session, I'd eaten well, you know, I'd ticked all the boxes. There was nothing else I could do. I just had to go out there and, you know, show them what I'm actually made of.
But in the first round, you were the only runner to get under 55 seconds, so that's starting right off.
Yeah, I mean, all the rounds, you know, with the 4 hurdles, it's quite difficult because you don't want to, you know, you've got to get the stride pattern, but at the same time you want to conserve energy because you've got semi-finals and then a final. So that those first rounds are pretty difficult, but I just remember running that and feeling so easy and crossing the line and not even feeling out of breath and you know, running a half decent time, and just thought, no, you're in shape, girl.
Now, Sally, I want you to take us through just before the race. You come out and you put your bag down. Remember what happened then?
I would have done one run over the first hurdle, and then I would have lied down on the floor.
Looking at the sky. Why did you do that?
Why? Because I knew everybody else would be charging around and, you know, getting themselves all ready, and I knew I was ready. I knew I'd done everything. And I knew all that was left to do was just to relax and, you know, and I wanted to block out everybody. I didn't want to stand around looking at everybody. You know, Sandra's attack was to try and psych me out, you know, from right on seeing her on the bus on the way down, you know, the looks, the daggers. And that is what she was worried about me. And that is how she was going to try and win that race. And I just remember thinking, I'm not going to let you win this race, I'm not going to let that get to me. So I was really conscious of just relaxing, shutting everybody out, and just, I knew exactly how I had to run that race.
So on the bus, you're coming all on the same bus. She's giving you that boxer's sight.
Yeah, I just remember getting on and she was sitting on the bus and she literally looked me up and down and was just trying to psych me out right from day one. And you know, I knew she was worried about me. That's great.
Are you mates now?
It's funny, we had a massive rivalry and, you know, she hated me really in some respects because every major championship, she would win everything else leading up to it, Grand Prix, you know, World Cup or whatever. But when it came to a major championships, I always went out there and delivered. So she so wanted Olympics, she so wanted the Worlds, but I kept robbing her of it. And it's funny actually because we both retired around about the same time. And then we bumped into each other when we were both working, and we sat there for 4 or 5 hours, just long lost friends, reminiscing. And we did. We had massive respect for each other, and we know that we both helped each other to achieve what we did, really. I mean, the following year we both broke world records, and we wouldn't have done that unless we were pushing each other. So we needed each other.
So take us through that final.
We had a full start, which, you know, when you're doing it over 400 is a bit of a nightmare. These guys get used to it. And I remember walking back and part of me was going, God, it would have bloody been over by now. Anyway, so just refocused and just said, you know, come on, just get out there. And I knew they were going to go off hard, but I knew exactly my stride pattern. I'd worked out every aspect. I knew they were going to be up on me at 200, but you know, I don't really remember running down that back straight or the 5th hurdle. My key was coming over the 8th hurdle with 2 hurdles to know, and a trigger mark that I'd worked in my mind is because I knew that if I was in the lead or up there, my best part, similar to this guy, was the last bit. Yes. And I knew that if I was up there, it was mine. And I remember coming off that 8th hurdle and saying, right, this is yours, you've got it. And then getting that stride pattern right, because I didn't want to get it wrong like the year before. And I'd worked so hard at getting that right in my mind. I knew exactly what I had to do.
And what were you were thinking on the ground, blocking everything out. What were you like now, after the race, when you've crossed that line?
When you cross the line, I just went through I just couldn't believe it. You know, I'd so wanted it and was so hungry for it. And then you feel like somebody's just going to take it away from you, and then you feel like, have I really done that? You know, I don't know, again, I just went back to that sort of doubt in my mind, and, you know, did that really happen? And, you know, it took, you know, a good couple of months for it to really sink in.
Was your fiancé now, your husband, Jonathan Bigg, was he close by?
Well, this is a whole funny thing. Not really, no, because he wasn't going to come out. We had always been on the phone, and he was always there when I needed him on the phone. And then someone rang him up literally 24 hours and said, right, you need to be out there. And I rang him up and said, look, I've got a ticket here for the stadium. You need to come in. And he managed to get in, and it was a terrible ticket right up the back, and he managed to talk his way into this security lady saying, look, my fiancé is out there just about to run, please let me stand by the finishing line.
That should have been a warning for you for the future.
And then he sat on this little step, you know, and watched it from there.
Well, great. Now, what about the relay? You get your bronze.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll be honest with you, you don't go to a championship. I mean, none of us did. We're all relay runners. But you didn't go to a championship focusing on winning the relay. You didn't train for the relay. I mean, they do now. They prepare some athletes for relay. Big problem there, I think. Yeah, so, but, yeah, absolutely not. So for me, you were dealing with somebody who was injured, but you know, without sounding too arrogant, even injured was good enough to absolutely command a place on the relay team. But, you know, I was injured and I wasn't happy and I wasn't comfortable, and I was hanging in there. And we won a bronze medal in the relay, and, you know, I have to say, Olympic medals are, not all medals are the same. So for David Grinley, I remember, you know, that was it was my first Olympic medal, and I remember him being delighted with it. You know, it was fantastic. But remember, I'd come off being a world champion the year before, and I it didn't mean much to me. It wasn't what I went to do.
Those are the days of our lives. Those are the days of our lives.
Did the bronze and the disappointment just getting a bronze prepare you for the next one?
No,
not
making the Olympic final in Barcelona was devastating for me. Yeah. You know, I was a world silver medalist, should have been world champion. I didn't make the Olympic final, and the world started to move ahead. And so you start to worry, and you start to get serious, which I did. And I think that's the test. And I mean, these two both, went on from their Olympic golds to then, arguably, you know, in athletic terms, go one better. You know, to then go the next year and win the world titles, run faster, break a world record. You know, that's the mark. That's the mark. And that was, you know, so for me, we all have this dream, and the big dream is to stand on the rostrum at the Olympic Games. I mean, ultimately, that's the one you want, and you would swap that medal for anything. And of course, I'd stood on every other rostrum as an individual, but not on the Olympic rostrum. So I had to wait 4 years to get to that.
You had a virus, didn't you?
I had a virus.
Was that serious? Or
yeah, everything was serious, you know. I shouldn't, you know, I was stupid. I was just a catalogue of... But, you know, that's where it is. Well, no, but you do, you know. I mean, I never got niggles. I always got a problem. Yeah. And that's why, for me, in Atlanta, to stand on that rostrum behind a guy who I wasn't going to beat, Michael Johnson, that's it. And I think for all of us, the key to when you look back over your career, the most important thing is did you feel that you maxed out? Did you feel that you got the best you could out of what you were given, whether it's injuries or whatever? And there's no doubt about it. You can't argue it. We all did. And for me, that represented an Olympic silver in '96 behind Michael Johnson. Would I have won that if I'd won a medal in '92? I don't know. But I mean, absolutely not making the Olympic final in '92 made that dream even bigger for me, because I only had one more chance, and I wanted that Olympic medal desperately.
Sally, you get a medal in the relay?
We got bronze, actually. Yeah, and we were pretty chuffed with that. I just really enjoyed it. I remember just going out in the stadium and looking up and looking around for once, and just loved being part of that team, and the excitement that the girls got for getting a medal. I don't think anyone, again, we might have probably thought we were going to fourth, so we moved one up and got a bronze.
Who were you chasing in that one for medal? Can you remember?
Oh, it must have been the Americans and the Russians. The Russians must have won it, and then the Americans usually was.
Unified team, I think they called it, didn't they?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and you just dipped out in the relay.
Story of my lives,
Yeah, a fraction of a second.
They always did.
We always did. I think the problem is, I hated the relays. I'm not going to lie. I hated running the relays because it's one of these things where I think the relay is supposed to be a coming together at the end of the championships where you all have fun, but it just caused so much problems. There was so much bickering. About who's going to run, what leg, who's going to do. And it just, after a while, seriously, I ran because it was my duty as team captain, and I ran for my country. But I just didn't like all, the squabbles and everything that went, behind the relay.
But also, you would have done the 200, and I'll tell you, the warming up, the warming down, the going through the call room, and you probably did that, I don't know, 6 times before you then go out and do the relay. That's the side you don't see. That's the hard side.
But I have to say, I mean, that is the difference between the sprint relay and the 4x4. Because the 4x4, I loved it. I mean, we loved it.
I loved it.
It was, but in some ways, I mean, maybe the reason it was easier to love because, of course, they're 2 completely different races. So, and the main difference is we don't really have to practice the changeovers. Because actually, unless you're pretty stupid, it's not that difficult in a 4x400 metre relay to be standing there with someone coming in really slowly because they're knackered to take the baton. Whereas these guys had to train and train and train, and of course they couldn't do that because in some ways some of the individuals in that team, particularly Linford and John Regis, and Colin Jackson, I guess, were victims of their own success because they were successful individuals. They weren't going to give the time, or couldn't give the time. To train for the relay, whereas, and this is why, and I'm not involved anymore, you are more than I am. This is why now, of course, you get a breed of athletes who are sort of bred to win us medals in the relay because they have the time and the focus to do that. And as we see most years, if you don't do the practice, you don't win.
But you said that. I mean, if you look at the Jamaicans, you see the problem is now it'll be very, very hard, and for us to win a gold in the 4x1 again, ever, I think. Because, take the Jamaicans, they got 4 guys who can run sub-10. We don't have 4 guys who can run sub-10. So they don't stretch the changeovers like we do. They just grab the baton, whiz down as fast as they can, and play safe. And, we got to take risks. And I think sometimes, to the detriment of people's individual performances, they sacrifice it, just, for the relay because it counts as 4 medals. And I think if you go out there and you do well individually, it's inevitable that you're going to go out there and try that much harder to win a relay.
Can I ask you about the changing Olympics? I mean, your Olympics in Barcelona, you've got the American Dream Team basketball with Magic Johnson and Michael Jordan.
You couldn't miss them. You couldn't miss them. You couldn't miss them because wherever they were, they had people flocked around them wherever they went.
What did you think about
that? That was the best gig of the Olympic Games, wasn't it? You imagine me one of them. I'm going to turn up. I'm going to be in the Olympic Village. I'm going to enjoy watching the sport. And actually, all I've got to do is put my tracksuit on, turn up, and we're going to win without even trying. So what they got to do was totally immerse themselves and enjoy being an Olympian and being part of it without actually the pressure of having to perform. And it's the same. I still think it must be the same for some of the tennis players now. Whatever.
But Jennifer Capriati also.
Well, yeah, it
won,
can't
didn't
be
she?
the same. It just can't be the same.
I remember going down to the dining room and seeing all the dream team down there, and just all the other athletes from around the world were just flocking around them, totally all the
To
time.
me, that's very similar to what happened in '91, because I think the Americans lost, so they changed the rules, and it enabled them to pick any team. And I think if the optimum goal in your sport is not to win Olympic Games, then I can't think it's going to be the same. So, tennis players, they go out there and, they may win, but it never means the same to them as winning the Wimbledon. And, it's the same thing, even with football at the moment. World Cup, everyone wants to win the World Cup. And that's why they need to still take it back to the amateurs rather than, I suppose it's great, publicity and everything else to have the Michael Jordans but to go out there and have youngsters who are just on the edge, of basketball glory, I think it would mean a lot more to them than I think to Michael and those guys.
When I flash back to those real memories of the games, I guess it's funny. It's things like the heat and the sweat when you're waiting there. The stadium, the silence beforehand, and also things like where it was in Barcelona, that walk back down, which I didn't do until afterwards, down to all the fountains and stuff, and just seeing what Barcelona is really about, really, because beforehand you can't do any of that, you can't see any of that, and I felt like I'd sort of had a chance afterwards to sort of live that bit a bit.
Roger, do you remember, besides your disappointments, do you remember much about that?
I think you're in a bubble. You're an athlete. It's your life. You're at the Olympic Games, and there's nothing bigger. And for me, it wasn't a wonderful experience. We're not going to pretend that was. And but for me, looking back, I remember vowing to myself that, knowing I probably only had one more games left in me. Mm-hmm. I left Barcelona absolutely vowing to myself that I would do everything I could to make sure that I got onto the rostrum in Atlanta, because I knew that if you miss it, you've got to wait 4 years, and I didn't want to miss it again. So it was. It helped. It helped. Of course, it helped. Of course, it helped. It was a big part of what I went on to do.
And Linford, you won so many golds at different major games. I mean, on the podium for the Olympic gold.
It's a great feeling, and for me, it's an emotional feeling, because you realise millions of people around the world, whether they liked you or didn't like you, when they play God Save the Queen, for those people, they stand up and show respect. And you love to hear the national anthem. And I remember going to other championships, and they're playing the American anthem all the time, and I'm thinking, God, I wish it was one of ours, because we could, it just got, after a while, it just got one of those things. We weren't winning anything back in the early days, and you just wanted to hear, God Save the Queen. So once you got there and they played it, you thought, yes, it's because of, me, why that's happened, and it's such a lovely feeling. But for me, what stood out, I remember Ron was getting on the bus, I think when I was going out there, and he twisted his ankle. And he didn't make the final. He spent the final in the physio room. So, and that's something that stood out in mind, because, Ron's like my rock. And I always say, we've been out there, and if I had gone into it, when you have a problem and you doubt, there's always, I'd say 99% of the time, you never doubt yourself. But there's always that little 1% of doubts. And if I have that, normally Ron's next to me and I can talk to him. And he always has these really nice way of getting through it. Like, I'd say, God, Ron, he's running fast, what do I do? And he said, what's his PB? And what's yours? You've done it, he's got to do it again. So what are you bloody worried about? And I'm thinking, you're right there. It just makes me feel confident. So, that's all those kind of times when I spend out there with Ron. I mean, it's great to be on the podium, but just the little personal things little battles that we have, that helps me, get through the tunnel at the other side.
The great thing about winning golds, and you won your 2 silvers at Atlanta, it changes your life, doesn't it?
I mean, I didn't realise what would happen really, but you can say it changes your life just like that overnight. And I think that was half of it. I didn't know what to expect and what's going to happen then, straight afterwards, and that's it. You just on this roller coaster. You're scared of losing after that, or not being that person you were. So you go out and you train hard again, and you just back onto that. But yeah, it did. It was changed my life forever.
Linford?
Well, yes, it has changed my life. And I didn't go out there and think, okay, I just want to be famous. I just go out there and I just wanted to run fast. I wanted to do the best I could. And these are all the things that comes with it. So I'd rather have it than not, because it opens doors and it does things, and, you meet great people. The list just goes on. So for me, it's life-changing, and, I love every minute of it.
So if you missed one thing from athletics, what would it be?
I think it's that feeling of winning and crossing the line, and knowing that you've done everything out there, the best shot. You've given it your best shot. I learned a lot about myself. Not so much that Olympic race, but again the following year, the Worlds. Yeah. I learned so much about myself and who I am as a character that. It shocked me in some respects, and blew me away what the body can do and the mind can do, and all those sorts of things. Yeah.
Roger?
I think the thing I miss the most, and I've got it a little bit now, but is the clarity. We woke up every day, and we knew what our talent was, and we knew what our goals were, and we knew what we were going to do and where we were going. When you retire, that's gone. You wake up and it's okay. Got the medals, it's okay, I'm not complaining, but you don't have the clarity anymore, and you start to do this and that and bits and pieces, and we all sort of live off our past to a degree, and that's great, and I'm not complaining. I miss that absolute clarity of what I'm after, knowing the day, the time, the place of the Olympic final, knowing that it's down to me to get ready, and I've got a group of people around me working with me, all part of that journey, and the fun and the banter and all that sort of stuff. I miss that more than anything, more than any race, more than any travelling or anything. It's just moving towards that one point where you stand up and you're judged on that point. The real world isn't quite as hard in that respect, and it's not quite as clear. That's the one thing I miss.
Last word to you, Linford.
Well, I miss the competition. To be honest, I'm a competitor in all sense of the words, and I miss. I don't miss the training side of things, because I still do a little bit, but I miss that actually going out there. I coach, which gives me a little bit of it, because they say the best thing is doing it yourself and the second best is teaching others. And I get more frustrated because I'm coach, because I'm trying to think, why can't you just go out there and run fast? But, saying that, I just miss going out there and competing, especially at the time now, because, when we haven't got like sprinters winning, and I think, God, I wish I was 20 years younger. I'd go out there and give the crowd something to shout about. And that's the kind of thing I miss. I just miss going out there and competing.
Not the media attention.
Well, I'm going to get it anyway, Once you're there, you're there. It's just, you retire from sports and you retire from work and everything, but you never retire from the media. So if you got out there, you do something, it's, somewhere along the line, it's still going to be there with you.
Golden memories from golden athletes. Thank you so much for sharing them with us.
You're welcome.
Thank you, it's great.
Those are the days.